Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining for the special CMU Mumbai interview with Hardik Dedhia, co-founder of PharmEasy, and more especially a CMU alum who graduated 2011 with a master's in electrical and computer engineering. My name is Ashay Doshi. I will be hosting today's interview along with Anup, who will be running Q&A. I'll welcome Rekha Koita to say a few words of welcome for Hardik as well as all our guests. Rekha.
Thanks, Ashay. Welcome to a very warm welcome to all of you. And thank you for joining us today. I'm sure it's going to be a very exciting session with Hardik. Hardik, of course, is a CMU alum, so that makes it even more special, this whole event. I think the story of PharmEasy is something which is, known to all, at least, of course, we're going to find out more and get more into details, but I think it's really amazing to have one of our alums at the forefront of the whole digital health revolution in India. I mean, digital health is something which has been kind of adopted by Western countries since many years, and India is, I think, really picking up, especially, I think the whole COVID pandemic has really emphasized the need for accessible and affordable healthcare. And coupled with the whole, Prime Minister's focus on the Ayushman Bharat digital mission, etc., I think this is only going to go places and places here. So very warm welcome to you, Hardik. We are so, happy and grateful that you could take the time out to do this webinar for us, our alums, and all our other guests. And, without further ado, I'll just hand it over to Ashay. Ashay, it's all yours.
Yes. Thank you so much, Rekha. Thanks for your kind words. And today's conversation with Hardik is extremely interesting about integrating India's healthcare ecosystem, especially because India is at a very critical inflection point. With 1,500 patients to a doctor, India's healthcare has always been unorganized, fragmented, and very, very informal. But now we have innovators such as Hardik, PharmEasy, and API Holdings that are looking to change the status quo and organize a very unorganized sector. Hardik, PharmEasy has had phenomenal success. You're serving 12 million customers in 1,000 cities in India with 22,000 pin codes, which is a phenomenal trajectory. Today, we're going to deep dive a little more about your vision into the journey of PharmEasy as well as the vision for integrating the healthcare ecosystem. Our audience is extremely eclectic. As I've sent you the list, we have members of all the different universities, Ivy League universities, Indian startup founders, investors on board. So I'll welcome you to say a few words of welcome to our CMU community as well as our attendees before we get started.
Yeah, Bitcool. Very, very glad to be here. And, it's always a pleasure to be a part of these sessions. And this is in a way very momentous for us also. We're on our way to be a public company soon. So listed company soon. But yeah, very, very excited to be here and always happy to share our learnings, especially the mistakes that we made. And, that's what keeps us humble, keeps us growing. So yeah, happy to share.
Awesome. Looking forward to the conversation. So before we get started, I'll just quickly go over the format. So there'll be around 45 minutes of me interviewing Hardik, followed by the Q&A session. So I'd encourage everyone to put in their questions in the Q&A box as we go along. So towards the end, we'll pick out the questions and you can personally ask Hardik a question by unmuting yourselves. So Hardik, let's get started. So before we delve into PharmEasy, it is always very important to understand background and, the struggle story, piche kya hua tha when you started. The story of how you and your co-founder started Dial Health out of IIM. And that is a story of extreme grit and failure. Could you walk us through, the gap that you saw in the market that made you start Dial Health? And what can entrepreneurs learn from you as to how to spot gaps in the market and attack them, and then learn from initial failures?
Yeah, sure. So story is quite simple, but yeah, it's quite these sort of events happened over a period of 4 to 5 years, right? So most of the crux of the story is when Siddharth, who's the main co-founder in a way, he was sort of having like his second semester at IIM Ahmedabad. He is he's quite entrepreneurial in general. He comes from a family of doctors who have, set up their own hospitals and gone on to do good things in healthcare. But he chose not to be a doctor, and he was like, okay, let me become an engineer. But when we were all studying together in our bachelors, he decided in the first year itself that engineering was not for him. But he went through with engineering anyways. And third and fourth year, I started preparing for CAT and got into IIM Ahmedabad. He's a solid pedigree guy, right? Really sharp with numbers and comes with a solid business acumen, right? Probably inherited that, right? He was of the opinion, and this is mid sem in IIM Ahmedabad, when he realized here, working with Goldman, interning with them, he realized, yeah, if I have to spend 16 to 18 hours every day slogging for someone, I'd rather slog for myself, right? So that was sort of the seed of that he wanted to do something on on our own. He obviously was good friends with me and Harsh, and Dharmil and Dhaval are his childhood friends. So when it came to sort of exiting IIM Ahmedabad, he chose to opt out of placements and he started working on projects with his professor. He actually looked at a lot of things, and I was always in touch with him. He had पहले से ही उसने बोला था कि whatever we do, we'll do it together. So like these 4-5 people, we were always like in touch with each other, even though we were all spread out, right? I was in the US, Siddharth was in IIM Ahmedabad, Harsh was in NMIMS, and then he had joined Airtel. Dharmil was doing his own startup, Tabhi. Dhaval was actually finishing his MBBS. So we were all spread out, but still connected through some thoughts. We'll start something on our own someday. And Siddharth started with LEDs. At that point of time, this is early 2012. We thought maybe LEDs could be the next revolution in India. He even traveled to China to research on it. I also did a bit of research in our electrical engineering department, but we figured out it may not be the most exciting sector to choose. Many reasons for it. Some of them are, more about, where you could set up manufacturing and what could be, the constraints on the manufacturing side, because it was totally dependent on China, right? Similar to LEDs, we also looked into solar. And probably that would have been a good idea as well, but we thought maybe it is too highly regulated, and we just couldn't take that first step with solar for whatever reason, right? And then Siddharth started working on something which he could at least get a lot of quick feedback. So he started working with his dad to think of what could healthcare give us as an opportunity, right? And Siddharth's dad, being a very premier cardiologist, he had a lot of thoughts, but he said, look into the OPD side of things, right? And that was probably the right direction that we got. So the outpatient department, where you go for a consultation, you get some tests done, you get some prognosis, and then you maybe have some medicines, and you have sort of a chronic or a periodic treatment, right? Or a periodic course of interactions with doctors, diagnostic labs, pharmacies, and other players, right? So this was the place where Siddharth's father was like, why don't you look into this? This is a very big space and totally unorganized, right? If you look at the retailers, diagnostic players, distributors, no one has more than 1%. Yeah. This was early 2012, right? So you have an open canvas in terms of what you can do. And that was really the problem, right? The problem was, in this open canvas, where do you really start to make a dent, right? So we finalized that we'll do a lot of things in healthcare. I still remember the first PPTs we made. It was just, we are all eternally optimistic in general, but that PPT was eternal optimism to a different level, right?
You need that.
We just thought that just by coming together we'll solve things, but wasn't that easy. We started officially working on this July 2012. We all came together, and our view was that we'll try and solve. We'll try and make like a one-stop shop for healthcare products, healthcare services, and that ambition was good, but it was maybe a bit too much, right? And that was our first mistake, right? Our go-to-market was too wide. Our products and services that we were trying to capture on the platform were too wide again. So neither did we have a good demand side go-to-market, neither did we have a good grip on the supply side, right? And technology in 2012 was, it was like pre-3G era, really low bandwidth connections. Smartphones were not very pervasive yet. Web technologies were also not so good. Apps though were a luxury, right? No one could afford app development. So it was a culmination of multiple factors. Us being naive, this was the first real project that we were doing, right? None of us had real experience, right? We were all fresh out of college, and that was a good thing in hindsight. But at that point of time, we just didn't know where to focus our resources and what to solve. We just had a very, very open gamut. And that obviously we realized in 6 months, right? We were not getting traction. We were not getting good customer experience. Our suppliers were not happy. Customers were not happy. Employees were not sure what we were doing. So, it starts hitting you very, very hard when you know that you're failing. And on top of that, the money that you're spending is all family and friends, right? So we didn't have any investors back then. It was all Siddharth's dad or someone else who we knew, and they were basically giving us
who gave up a lot to back your venture. I mean, everyone went all out in support. That ecosystem went all out in supporting you.
No, I think we had a good ecosystem. That is obviously without a doubt. But we were pretty cognizant that, there are limits to what they can do. And the good thing, I think, in hindsight is that we knew when to, we knew when to say a failure is a failure, right? When to accept that this model is not working. Maybe the time is not right. Maybe we are not the right team, or there is, there's no market dynamic towards it, right? So we wrapped up dialhealth.com, which was supposed to be like a one-stop health shop, and these were days when even health card was running, right? I'm sure they also faced a lot of issues at that point of time. But we basically wrapped it up very quickly, and we said, maybe this model is a two-sided model, and both sides we are not able to manage. Dynamic demand, dynamic supply, right? So we said, let's at least start working on the supply side. And that was, in a way, a good decision, because at least we could then understand one aspect of the business. And we said, okay, we'll convert ourselves from dialhealth.com to Dialhealth Medical Stores, a chain of medical stores across Bombay. There again, the connections of Siddharth's dad helped a lot. Our go-to-market there was go to hospitals who don't have their own pharmacies, provide pharmacy as a service to them, right? So that they can have a proper integrated pharmacy in their hospital. And these were small hospitals, 20 bed, 40 bed, 60 bed, basically less than 100 bed, run by a bunch of doctors, not by an institution, right? So, and then you had a lot of such hospitals in Bombay. We were quickly able to grow to about 10 hospitals. And these pharmacies were running brilliantly because you didn't have to look at the demand side. The hospitals they had occupancy. Basis that occupancy, you were serving those particular patients, and you were solving a problem which was pretty good in a way. You were helping the patients get, I would say, convenience, and you were reducing the hassle that they have to go through otherwise, right? Because then the patient's relative has to stand in a queue, go to a medical shop outside the hospital. They may or may not get the right products. They may have to go to another one. They have to pay cash then and there. It doesn't get sort of, come into the patient's account. So these sort of things we did really well, and hospitals appreciated it. Patients also liked this sort of an experience. But there are limits to any model, right? And this sort of a business model is in a way skewed, because ultimately the control is in the hospital, right? They control the occupancy and hence the demand, right? So we always had profit sharing models, but profit sharing was never enough, right? You keep negotiating on, 24%, 26%, 28%, and that's a never ending sort of a cycle. So we understood that this particular model may not work for us in the long run. We could make a very good family business out of it, but not truly a venture, right? So we started looking into, okay, what next? This was profitable, so we weren't in any sort of danger. But we knew that we needed to pivot. This wouldn't
to scale and make it bigger. Yeah.
This wouldn't satiate any of us, right? We are solving a problem, but the problem is not too big, and the stakeholders are not on your side, right?
Right.
So this is where we sort of kept pegging away and started understanding what else is happening, right? The problem sort of hit us directly when we scaled to about 13 stores in Bombay. And just to manage those 13 stores, we had to deal with about 100 distributors in Bombay.
Mm.
Now, if you see a typical distribution, let's say even FMCGs, right? You deal with one distributor for one company and you're set. You don't need to deal with another guy, right? But in pharma, that was not the case. We could see that, just for getting Cipla products across my 13 pharmacies, I have to probably deal with 20 distributors. Because some of them don't give me supplies on certain days, or some of them don't give supplies to certain pharmacies, or they're not dependable enough in case I need something in urgency, right? So we were able to give volumes to them. We were able to do partnerships. We were willing to do partnerships with them, but they were not concerned. And even if they were concerned, they weren't able to give us that level of service we demanded. So that basically hit us that, maybe this is the right spot. Pharma distribution is something which could be disrupted. So that's sort of our aha moment in terms of finding the first business model which was scalable, where you could I would say bring in technology, bring in processes, and scale up very fast. If you had the right go-to market, this could be a pan-India entity in no time. So that's where we sort of doubled down on this model, started focusing on this. And Siddharth being Siddharth, he came up with a very, very radical go-to-market for us. Instead of starting a distributor from scratch, we actually started acquiring distributors. Because there were a lot of distributors which were not run very professionally. They were having maybe some financial distress, or the owners or the promoters were not really interested in this. They had other businesses. So there were a lot of people who were happy to liquidate it and move on. And we basically capitalized on it. And we did a bunch of acquisitions in Bombay, converted them into better run organizations through better warehousing, better technology, better processes, empowering people, bringing technology on multiple ends with the pharma company, with the retailers. And that's basically where the bandwagon started for us. So after 2 pivots, we got into the right business model. And we realized in 2015. So basically, this took us like 2.5 years.
2.5, 3 years of perseverance.
Yeah. I mean, those were very difficult years for all of us. We were quite heavily leveraged in terms of our own, whatever our assets were, they were completely leveraged to just run these businesses, scale these businesses. But yeah, early 2015, we thought this was the right time to start something which was dial-L.com like in a way, which had a B2C presence. We were very confident that tech had moved ahead. We would be able to...
Digital platforms also had started.
Yeah, we would be able to give an experience which was smooth enough for someone to come onto a platform and say that, okay, I'll buy medicines from here, right? We had a better understanding of supply chain. We could actually give better fill rates. We could actually give better prices. And we just focused on, things which were actually relevant for the industry. So like availability was the most important thing, affordability after that, authenticity after that. So we started actually prioritizing these things, not just across tech, but ops as well. And that's what our goal was, that if you get good at these things, growth will follow, right? Because you are giving something which is a differentiated experience. So we went on this journey, and fast forward to today, we've gotten into more stakeholders. We work a lot on doctors as well to help improve their productivity. You mentioned about the doctor to patient ratio. It's absolutely abysmal. And we obviously try to provide softwares to doctors which help them in their practice. And these softwares are geared towards giving them about a 30 to 40% productivity boost, right?
Wow. That's a good sell. That's a good sell,
Yeah, so that's what we try and do for the ecosystem. Our thought process is that we want to make the supply chain stronger through the solutions we have. We want to make the doctor ecosystem stronger. and we want to bring the consumer ecosystem in a more connected way with the healthcare ecosystem that we have. So this is the platform that we are trying to build, and obviously this still feels like day one for us. There's still a long way to go.
Absolutely. And I think it's a bold vision. And I think what I got from the main backstory, which is a fascinating story when you hear, is that even after 3 years, you all were still persevering, pivoting. A lot of people, I feel like 90% of the people give up, because you're calculating opportunity cost. I could do a job, kar sakta hu, okay, I can do something else. But to keep on persevering and moving the needle, I think that's extremely important. And you mentioned acquisitions. I mean, obviously, you got into a point now where a unicorn startup acquired a listed Thyrocare, and you've gone on to make acquisitions, Acnomed, Docon. I think that was also one of like the aha moments for the startup industry when you did that. So I wanted to understand now, getting into the integrated ecosystem. You mentioned you're working with doctors, you're working with consumers. That has traditionally been very, very fragmented overall. So what are the attitude, switches that you had to deal with, cultural changes? For example, if your target demographic is folks who need medicines on a regular basis, how did you go about or experience that cultural change or get them to adopt technology early, both on the doctor side as well as the patient side? And how does that fit into the line of integrating the ecosystem?
Sure. And just on the point of not giving up, right? I mean, the good part is that as we sort of scale the teams as well, right? And it's not just about us giving up, right? The teams can give up, and then you have to give up, right? It's not just about founders, being resilient, right? So I think the good thing was that we accepted failure very easily, and we didn't have too much of experience either way, right? So we didn't know what's on the other side. Like for us, we were trying to solve a problem, and we didn't have any other baggage that, hey, I can do this. I mean, we all can do that, but for us, we were so engrossed in just solving that problem. You would always have some victories, small victories, which just keep you going, right? It's never always completely dark or completely good, right? Even today, we have more resources, but we still struggle to scale sometimes on certain aspects of the business, right? So there's always these mini ups and downs along with the big ups and downs, right? So they just keep you going. And my advice to anyone is, if you're starting, just try and give it 2 to 3 years minimum. And at least from my experience, you're never going to settle on the model on day one, right? It will take you 2 to 3 pivots for sure, right? And there are more pivots in our journey, but that would just make our conversation much longer. So be prepared for those sort of moments where you have to go by intuition, and just having good co-founders always helps. Having good team always helps.
And everyone all in with their money and property and mortgage assets. Everyone all in. I mean,
that's something which you get a lot of confidence from the people who you sort of trust and venerate. When they give you some freedom to execute, and they give you the backing, you obviously want to prove them right. So that just helps also in a way. But on the question of integrated ecosystem, I think we've had a lot of learnings, and it's been quite a long journey already for us. So learnings have also evolved, right? What worked in 2016 doesn't work now anymore. We have a very differentiated competitive environment also now, right? So back then in 2016, we were all trying things out, and in a journey for any product, there are always early adopters, and then you make the product in a way where it fits a very, very mass market, right? So we've been able to transition from early adopters to mass market on the consumer side very, very well. On the doctor side, we are still in the early adopter space, right? Our view is that we want to create products for doctors which are not a one size fits all. We want to build products which are very, very custom towards a particular specialization, because that's how they work. A cardiologist workflow is very different from, let's say, an endocrinologist workflow, or a gynecologist or pediatrician, or so on and so forth. So we focused on pediatricians to begin with. We moved on to other specialties. But even today, we don't do more than 10 specialties. And even in those specialties, we've only scaled on pediatricians to a mass market.
Okay.
We first went to the key opinion leaders, the top pediatricians, and got the product built in a way where it would probably surmise most of the requirements of all pediatricians. And then we were able to go to the rest of the ecosystem as well. In fact, on the pediatrician side, it's come to a level where DocOn is now officially like part of their association, that, hey, this is a product which we certify. Like, this is a good product. This will help you in not only digitizing the entire consultation experience, but it serves as a good health record system also. And you can share records with the patients as well. So it has a lot of benefits. Doctors see it over a period of time, and doctors are very well read and they have certain expectations, right? You can't give a run-of-the-mill solution to them. So we work very, very hard on really customizing these solutions for them and then taking it to a bigger market within that specialization. So there, I think the learnings are, still coming. It's still in that early adopter phase. And we'll take maybe more time to get to the mass market phase, but that also will be specialization wise. On the consumer side, I think the learnings are that, people in India do look at discounts a lot more than compared to convenience. But what is changing is that the dynamic towards convenience is changing. There is a segment or a cohort which is developing, which is more focused on convenience, especially for healthcare, which is more focused on authenticity, trust. So I think our focus over the last 2 years has been to build more and more trust. And become more like a digital front door for the consumers, right? And that's where most of our acquisitions also, if you see, like Thyrocare and MedLife, have been in that direction, that you want to provide medicines, you want to provide diagnostics, and over a period of time, consultations also through a singular interface, which can become like a digital front door for consumers. So that will have a lot of network effects for us.
Yeah, and that behavioral change that you're not, I wouldn't say competing with, but you're trying to organize is the trust of, say, my parents or my grandmom calling the local Nobel Plus and say, ye bhijwa do, and in 15 minutes, the guy is home and, but you are essentially trying to organize this and scale that organization, which I'm sure poses those challenges as well.
Yeah. So one thing that we do very different, and maybe some pharmacies are doing it, but a lot of others don't do, is that we follow the Drugs and Cosmetics Act with every comma, full stop, everything, right? That's not easy for any pharmacy to do, right? So we do create certain obstacles for consumers to buy medicines, because those are governed by the law. Those are mandated by the law. Like if you have a prescription for certain medicines, that prescription cannot be older than 6 months, right? So in those cases, we have to get fresh prescriptions, and that's not an easy journey for the customer. We try and help them in that journey, but there's always some leakage in that journey, right? So these sort of things we do, which you would not expect a Nobel Plus to do, right? And that's the lay of the land. That's how things have been moving. So we do have certain inefficiencies because we follow the letter of the law to the T. But that's what we are prepared to do. We're prepared to build the systems in the right way, so that whenever we implement something, it is scalable, it is governable, and compliant. So these are things which are challenging for us compared to a very straightforward model that existed or has existed for a long time. But we try and tackle it through technology as much as possible. And technology can solve certain things, but then again, there might be some limitations.
Yeah. And I think what I'm key understanding I'm getting here is, well, as those one-off stores, jugaad can happen and you can survive, but jugaad cannot scale. To scale, you need those processes and systems. You're building for the long term. You're not building for the next year or 2 years.
Yeah, we want to build for convenience, not jugaad, basically.
But have you faced any, challenges from the individual, chemists and pharmacies? Because, essentially, you're not, I wouldn't say you're replacing them, but you are organizing them under an umbrella. Yeah. So it's almost a case
we faced these challenges initially.
Yeah.
No, we faced these challenges initially because, people didn't understand the model, and there's always some panic or, see, we are disrupting the way the industry works, but we're not dislocating anyone, right? We're not displacing anyone. We work with pharmacies, but we make sure that they rise to a level which we expect them to do, right? We want them to raise the bar, right? We want them to be a part of a supply chain which is, connected with the ecosystem and not be like, I'll run my own shop the way I want. Correct. We want them to have inventory which is digital. We want them to have order promise systems, order orchestration systems which are connected with the tech that we've built. So those are expectations that we have. These expectations don't match with every chemist in the country, but they do match with a lot of people who want to be a part of such things. And that is true for other competitors also, right? Right. Whether it's NetMeds, 1mg, etc. They all are trying to do the same thing. We may have different business models to some extent, but largely through technology, through transparency, we are trying to solve problems which are good for customer for sure. That's the first stakeholder, the main stakeholder. But there are other stakeholders also who are equally important for us. And that's where healthcare is very interesting, right? You have government as a stakeholder as well, because it's a highly regulated industry. You have pharma companies who are, actually the real manufacturers. They also have a play in this, right? And they can actually influence it much more positively in the future. You have a doctor who's actually the main actor in the ecosystem, because consumer patient doesn't take a decision on themselves, right? Correct. You ideally should have you ideally should have the doctor informed at every step of the journey, right? What medicines were actually dispensed to the patient with respect to the prescription that was given.
But वो भी इतना नहीं होता ना. India, a lot of people self-medication is also high. So that's something that you probably dealt with as well.
Self-medication, see, I mean, as per the letter of the law, there's nothing, it shouldn't be allowed, right? Or there are OTC medicines, which is fine. That's over the counter anyways. But for prescription medicines, you need a prescription. Now you go to the doctor and get it, or you do a teleconsultation. I think things have evolved very nicely in the COVID period. Earlier, there was no law on teleconsultation, but now there is, which makes things
because of COVID.
Absolutely. The COVID period has changed a lot of things. And we obviously welcome the stuff that is happening on the government side with respect to ABDM as well, right? These are far-reaching changes that the government is making. And these are things which only the government can do, right? To create standards, to create protocols, to create interoperability, I would say measures and protocols. These are things which industry themselves cannot adopt very easily unless there is a push from the government or everyone comes together. Everyone coming together is just very difficult, and we're still in a very fragmented economy. So this is where I think we are really, really happy with the government measures that are taking place. COVID obviously accelerated all of these. These sort of things were always at a white paper level, but COVID has accelerated them really, really well.
Absolutely. And what I find interesting, you mentioned NetMeds and 1mg. I know you've started an omni-channel model as well that you're now opening PharmEasy. Correct me if I'm wrong, like franchises where you would take over the local chemists and make them a PharmEasy storefront. So what's the thinking behind that omni-channel model, and how does that face up to the competition that is now rising with NetMeds and 1mg with Reliance and Tata entering this?
Yeah. So the right word is not take over. We don't take over anything. But people are happy to work in a franchisee model because PharmEasy as a brand is quite recognizable now, right?
Definitely.
It's a brand which has a good pull as well. It is a brand which is, I would say, in terms of NPS, it's a loved brand, right? People love the experience that they get. And we work a lot on making sure that the NPS, stays at that level and improves further. So we have, over the last 3-4 years, we've had a lot of inbound interest as well, right? Which we've now converted into a proper program. And we want to make sure that, these stakeholders also get a proper sustainable way of building a business, right? Where we are building a good brand, they could come in and provide good customer experience, which is of the same level that you get on the website or, when you come online. So that's what we are working on. And again, the point is, how much can we invest on the tech side? And that's what we are doing, right? We are trying to build technology which helps them give experience the same way we are able to give it from an online experience. This is where omni-channel actually sits very well into our business model. Not everyone would want to place a medicine order online, right? It's just impossible, right? You can't, there are needs which are more urgent in nature.
Correct.
Or there are people who may not like a way to access healthcare through, let's say, their mobile phone or a website, right? For those people, you obviously still want to give a very good experience, right? And this is a model which helps us reach out to a larger audience.
Definitely. I know. I mean, I think you've done well in terms of the coexisting of two models, digital as well as physical. And would you say that that's your magic? I mean, at least from the latest number and my latest research, PharmEasy has more like 12% more orders and greater than 40% of the e-pharmacy market. So do you think that's the magic sauce that's keeping you, competitors at bay?
I wouldn't comment on any of the competitors. I think everyone's doing a great job. We are all sort of working together also at a strategic level in terms of putting the industry first, right? Competition is one thing, but the market is so huge that it's all about coexisting, growing together, collaboratively growing on these things, and building an industry which is built on transparency and trust, right? So we work with, I mean, when we had the first and second wave, we were all working with the government in terms of whatever solutions we could provide. With respect to vaccines as well, I think we've all played a very, very active role. In terms of NDHM, ABDM, we have a very active role again as well in terms of integrations that we're doing. So I think we don't look at it more from a competitive angle. We look at it more in terms of we are all co-creating the new industry in a way, right? Sort of healthcare 2.0. And government again is becoming a very integral player, right, in this by bringing in the right protocols and standards. So I think we are at a phase where over the next 10 years, I think we will see that these business models will scale up. Omnichannel is, I think, the name of the game for not just us, but for many other startups as well. Like even Lenskart has been doubling down on it a lot, right? I can give more examples, but basically omnichannel is something which is relevant for a country like India, which is quite huge. We are not actually just one country. If you look at it geographically, it's like 4 or 5 countries put together, right? So it's not easy for just one business model to scale up and serve the needs of the country, right? So omnichannel is there to stay. And for us, even with omnichannel, it's going to be a long time before we even reach like a 10% market share. So the market is really, really huge. And to add to that, we've kept adding segments as well, right? So now we have diagnostics also to scale up. So they're also, again, highly fragmented, 3 or 4 players who are organized, but 80 to 85% of the market is extremely fragmented. So again, a big headroom to play.
Big headroom, I think that's a good segue into our kind of final section before Q&A is obviously you have, as API Holdings and PharmEasy, a lot of investors on your term sheet. So like you mentioned diagnostics, you've taken over Thyrocare, there's multiple areas where you're playing and trying to carve out that niche. So when you have investors on board and you have growth estimates and growth targets, how do you balance that product versus growth balance when you are growing? Because how do you maintain that focus, or how do you delegate across the teams?
So I think that's a constant battle in every company, right? Long-term versus short-term, what goes into the product or what is important to meet targets. I think everyone faces a lot of pressures on all of these things, but we've been very, very lucky that and touch wood, we've been hiring very, very heavily on technology, and we've had an operations team which has been with us since day one. So pre-pandemic, we were, I would say, at least on the technology side, we were stocked up to that extent. We had a CTO who came in early 2019. He was able to create a very good technology team in the next 6 months itself. And by the time pandemic hit us, we were in a well-oiled sort of a process when it came to balancing innovation, short-term versus long-term, and how the company would react to these sort of, I would say, signals, right? If you're not able to meet targets, what are the things you should be able to do, which don't harm NPS, don't harm profitability, but you're able to achieve those things in a in a sustainable way, right? So and this team, as I said, this team coupled with the ops team, which was there since day one with us, they understand the business more than us founders as well, right? There are aspects of the business which they completely own, and they don't own it from a ownership just perspective, but they really understand it and empathize it with the other aspects of the business as well, right? So if someone's taking a call on inventory, they are going to try and help on retention and vice versa. So these are guys who have really understood and built the business. So it's a good combination of ops and tech that we have, which is not taking these difficult decisions. And it's not like just founders have to come in and sort of show the way or make that difficult call. These are things which get tracked very minutely at very short periods of interval, so that things don't go out of hand. And I don't think we've had any major episode where we've not achieved certain targets, and that's all because of the team.
Right. I think that's a valuable lesson for a lot of startups, looking to raise or have raised, and how to balance that reality focus versus projection focus, and balance all the interests that are surrounding you as a team. So before, I think 3-4 minutes we'll get to Q&A. What is something that you're most excited about in the next 2 years and the next 5 years, that either you're working on or you see that a fundamental change or in that direction that even us users or patients can be excited about?
Maybe over the next 5 years, I would say the way so I'll maybe give an example which is more of a personal example. So my mother went through an episode of lung fibrosis, right, which is very difficult to diagnose sometimes, and even after that there's no real treatment around it. You can just try and mitigate it in terms of symptoms, and in many cases it could lead to a severe shortening of your life cycle, right? So life expectancy, sorry. But we were quite lucky that in her case the progression of the disease didn't happen that way, right? Now the thing is, there's a lack of awareness of these sort of, I would say, diseases which are not mainstream, right? Now these diseases will benefit a lot from better, I would say, awareness on one side and better health records. Now the name of the disease is actually idiopathic. Like the reason is not known. It's called idiopathic because no one knows the reason. It's not easy to diagnose as well why it happened. It happened. Now, there are two sides of it. One is through awareness, you could create a lot more know-how in the general community that maybe it's because of pigeons. So pigeons, dhyan rakho, like pigeons are everywhere in most of our communities, and certain areas of Bombay do have a lot of pigeons, right? So now that is one thing which you can create awareness about, but that's not enough. What's really needed is that the patients who go through these sort of illnesses, what sort of records do we have from year -10 till the diagnosis happened, and after diagnosis what treatment was given and what worked. This data set does not exist from an Indian context, which is very important, right? Like we were lucky in my mother's case that the disease did not progress so much, but we actually don't know why it didn't progress so much. And we were pure lucky, right? I mean, it didn't progress, but we don't know why. We were lucky or we did something right. We still don't know that. Did the medicine work? Did something else work? Was there a change in climate or I don't know what, right? So these are things which are, hurting us as a community. And these sort of diseases don't get talked about much, but they are rampant. If you talk to doctors, they face the challenge that they don't have enough data to do research, right? They want to do research. They want people to participate in it, but they really don't have the tools, utilities, and they don't have a standards and protocol system or a health record system which allows them to do it. So I'm really excited the role that the government has started taking on defining these protocols, standards, consent mechanisms, etc., which would make research possible in the Indian context. And the benefit of this will come maybe 10 years later, maybe 5 years from now, but maybe for certain let's say new medicines working in the Indian context, we really don't know. For certain diseases which are very specific to Indian context, or the foods that we eat or the climate that we have, we really don't know what would work. I think those sort of things could start, maybe we could see that first good example of it coming out after 5 years.
Absolutely. And I think that's really exciting me too, because this is more than just, on the business end is obviously important, but this is a huge societal and cultural shift where at least when I was growing up, and I'm sure when my parents and your parents grew up, the remedy for any illness was either just one standard, Crocin Lelo, okay, cough syrup, take the syrup. But me personally, I think as of 2 months ago, because of my brother, I took this food intolerance test from Metropolis, where they test you for 200 foods with your blood. And I found out that I'm intolerant to so many foods that was causing so many different issues, and I didn't even know it. So if PharmEasy and yourself can, you're on track to push this cultural change of informed medical decision making and record keeping, I think that's a significant.
It's going to be a journey. Yeah, it's going to be a journey, but I think the government has taken the right steps. Now it's up to the industry to adopt it.
Absolutely. Awesome. So Hardik, we as you see, the Q&A box is filling up. So I'll get Anoop on. So Anoop, if you want to, turn on your video and start, ask your own questions as well and pick the questions you think, I can unmute them.
Yeah. Hi. Thanks, Hardik, for taking your time and coming to speak with us. We share two different institutions of alumni, both Carnegie Mellon and DJ Sangvi.
Oh, awesome. I didn't know that. But yeah, great. But you must be a senior to me, right?
I think so, yeah. A couple of years. 2008, I think, batch. Speaking of the last thing we were talking about, government role in sort of building the national health stack, I think Aditya Chittor has a really interesting question related to that. We'll unmute you, Aditya, if you're on here.
Yes. Hello. Hey, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hey.
Yeah, please go ahead with your question.
Absolutely. Hey, Hardik. Hey, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. I'm in India for the past 2 months, before which I was a consultant with Deloitte, and I was an operations product manager with Meta. So for the past 2 months, I have been a business development officer for Aditya Diagnostics Research Laboratories, which is a small diagnostic center in the middle of Hyderabad. And that's where some of my question and passion comes from at the moment. And I noticed that, the past 15 years, the IT has become an essential function within healthcare. However small, however big the business is, everything you do, IT has to ride along with you. And that's where it's really interesting that the government is looking to provide an infrastructure, a national-wide infrastructure to give you a backbone of IT for everybody. So Hardik, I would like to know what your views are about the national health stack, and how what is the kind of infrastructure and change that it is going to bring about to the country as a whole, and maybe diagnostics as an industry as well.
So Aditya, I wouldn't comment on diagnostics particularly, but so National Health Stack started as a white paper, but it has been adopted by the government in the last 2 years, right? And that's what you see in terms of the National Digital Health Ecosystem, or the Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission. That is the manifestation of National Health Stack as a concept into an actual implementation, right? And what they're trying to provide is basically trying to bring the industry onto a common platform with respect to standards and protocols, right? So, like, for example, very, very simple thing is there's no drug registry in India. There are a lot of products. If you see any medicine which is approved by the FDA, they approve it in a pen and paper format. It doesn't come into a drug registry that these are the, let's say, 3 lakh, 4 lakh drugs which are approved to be sold in India. Every industry participant has to maintain that list themselves. Like we maintain a list, and in our list there are 3 lakh products. In maybe someone else's list, there could be, let's say, 30,000 products or 50,000 products, depending on what they're able to do, right? Depending on what sort of products they're able to stock keep. So this is the first problem that you see in the industries. There's no standardization. If you pick up an FMCG product, you actually see a barcode which is generated, which has a GS1 barcode, which means the government also acknowledges that this is a unique product and this is how to identify that product. So I think there are a lot of these fundamental things which were missing from the healthcare industry. And that's where the National Health Stack also started to mandate these things, but it was never picked up. COVID actually accelerated this activity. And we see the manifestation of this in different formats in the National Digital Health Ecosystem or the Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission. And these are things which will take some more time to settle. The industry will also take some time to understand these things and pick them up at a bigger scale. But the early integrations have already happened. There's, I think, about 27 players who are integrated with the manifestation of National Health Stack. And these solutions are providing a better way to create health records, store health records, maintain health records at the end of the, let's say, the pharmacy or the diagnostics or the health record provider, and provide these records to the patient as well, give them consent mechanisms, whom to share these records, whom not to share these records. So I think it gives a very overarching standards and protocols interface, which the industry can adopt. And there'll be a gestation period where everyone will adopt it, get it into the use case that they are solving. And over a period of time, I think it will become mainstream. But yeah, I think this is very, very exciting. And that's something which I've highlighted already. That's what gives us a lot of excitement, that we are in this, sort of period where the government is an active player, right? Because generally in a regulated sort of an industry, if government doesn't act much, so what else can you do?
Absolutely. It's really exciting because I think we are going to have something like an Epic in the US, but so much better because it's collaboratively.
Yeah, absolutely. And the good thing about India is that, we've generally skipped certain development phases, right? We've sometimes gone to the next phase much faster than our Western counterparts. So I think maybe in health, we are taking that journey of moving on to maybe the right framework of healthcare. We are not there yet. We are far from it. But maybe, these sort of advances by the government, these sort of catalysts which are provided by the government, they are going to help us get there much faster.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking that question, Mr. Hardik. It's a pleasure to talk with you.
Sure.
Thanks for the question, Dedhia. Moving on to the next question, we have a question from Trupti Doshi about building trust. If we can unmute her.
Sure. That is my mother who wants to ask you a question.
Oh, okay. Okay, perfect.
Good evening, Mr. Hardik, and congratulations, Yala. You're a true inspiration to all the young entrepreneurs, including my son. So I want to know, how do y'all give better prices and everything? Y'all even advertise about it. How do you convince them that it's not spurious, it's not generic? How do you convince the doctor? Sometimes the doctor says, please don't trust these online people.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that?
Yeah. No, I think it's a very relevant question, and something which we are constantly working towards. And trust, unfortunately, doesn't have a metric, right, that you can quickly just create and follow, right? Trust is something which is part of a relation, right? So we'll have to do a lot of things, but I'll quickly just maybe tell you about the main thing that we've done over the last 3 to 4 years, which gives us a lot of confidence as I would say, management of the company, that there's actually no spurious product in the ecosystem that we sort of manage. We from the time any product enters the ecosystem, it is QR coded. And this is true for the distributors that we work with, the retailers that we work with, anyone who is working within the supply chain, which provides towards the consumers that we're talking about. Any strip, any bottle that enters that ecosystem is QR coded at the entrance of the ecosystem. It is tagged against a particular product, and that serial number is generated at a strip level. So let's say if we buy 10 strips of Crocin and we enter it into our ecosystem, there'll be 10 different serial numbers on those 10 strips, and we'll be able to track that strip across our ecosystem from distributor to retailer, retailer to consumer. Consumer might return the product back. We might give it back to the supplier. We might give it back to the pharma company. Whichever is that inward outward movement, that is completely governed by the QR code. And we buy only from trusted sources, which is either the pharma company or an appointed distributor of the pharma company. And we have checks and balances to make sure that the batch codes that we get from the pharma company or the distributor are validated. So this allows us to track products within our ecosystem. Even if they go out and come back into the ecosystem through returns, we only accept returns with QR codes on the product, and we validate these QR codes when we take them back. So these are things which we've started doing. In fact, we've done it for the last 3 years, and it's it's being followed completely to the T across all of our ecosystem. But that is the one thing that helps us build trust, and we are going to market it also in that way. Today, we don't market it in that sense, but that is the first thing that we've done, which is not easy to do because the volume of products is such that QR coding is itself a very expensive activity for us. But we believe that to build trust, we will have to take these calls. And this is the first of many things that we want to do, but I'll not comment on those things. I'll comment on it when we actually start doing this.
Yes, that's what I was asking you. That, maybe it's difficult to market it that way. Sometimes they can just, catch you for something which is not supposed to be caught. So.
Yeah, I mean, conveying trust is not easy, right?
Yes.
Earning trust is not easy. But conveying that you're a trustworthy person is also not easy. We can say we are a trustworthy company, but we'll have to actually earn it.
Yeah, because even some chemists and all try to run you down, because they want their business is getting affected, kinds.
Yeah.
So no, hopefully my mom will now not order from Noble Plus. Thank you. Hopefully she'll not call Noble Plus and she'll order from PharmEasy.
100%.
No, please keep giving us feedback. I mean, we don't have a perfect system yet, and I'm sure even Noble Plus can improve on what they're doing. But always welcome feedback, and trust is one thing which I think we'll have to constantly work on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Doshi. So speaking on something you touched on before about India skipping a few steps, like how I guess in the telecommunication industry we skip to going digital on mobile directly. Then what I was trying to understand, what is that step we've skipped in the healthcare sector that you think?
So we haven't skipped it yet, but I think there are very good indications that the step that the government has taken because of COVID, I think that will help us, propagate ourselves, right? Because if you see in healthcare, where America is or where the Western countries are, they've taken those steps organically, right? And we've had this sort of an event because of COVID where we've had to all realize, and especially it was very relevant in the second wave, that our healthcare system just cannot handle the load that they were, put under, right? And those sort of sorry situations could have been managed much better had we had a connected ecosystem, right? To build a connected ecosystem organically would have taken us maybe 50 years, right? Which is what has taken the West also, right? But my sense is because of this event leading to NHS sort of a white paper getting pushed into implementation much faster, we could be there in 10 to 15 years, right? And that's a very, very accelerated, and you're almost like skipping 2 generations, right? You're doing things in 10, 15 years, which would have otherwise taken 50 years. So I'm very excited that we are in that cusp of that change. It hasn't happened yet. I hope it does. But the early signs are there that this would be the major catalyst that was needed. From an industry perspective, you see a lot of investment in the industry, right? That's always a good sign. But just that alone is never enough, right? For that industry to become more consolidated and more structured and organized. You always need the right support from the government, especially in a very regulated industry. So I think this is a welcome change, but it will take some time because even the biggest players are still less than 10% of the market, right? Individually. So, we still have a huge gap to fill in terms of tech adoption and adoption of the right standards, protocols, and then those things actually helping in the ecosystem, right? There's one thing to digitize, but there's so much backlog also. Like in healthcare, it's actually about history, which is important, right? Now, history ko kaise digitize karenge, that itself will be a big problem. So it's going to be at least a decade journey to see the real benefits of it. But I think in the next 10 to 15 years, we'll see really good examples of it coming out. And, there's enough meat in the industry to start adopting these things, right? There are startups who have the right funding to be able to put money onto these sort of projects.
I, for one, am very excited to see the future of, healthcare in India with, PharmEasy and all the, tech-enabled services.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So Hardik, we are at 8 o'clock. So is that a hard stop? We can call Rekha on for final comments.
Yeah, that would be a little better if we could.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So Rekha, if you can come on and, give your word of thanks. Thank you so much, Hardik, from my side. I'm very excited about the social as well as the business change that you're bringing out in the ecosystem, and looking forward to learning from you and staying in touch. So over to you, Rekha.
Thank you so much, Hardik, for a very fascinating and insightful session. I think what's happening in the country is really too fascinating. And, through the foundation that I run, we have been involved with NHA and ABDM rollout. And I know that the road ahead is long and arduous, but I am sure that, I'm happy that at least we have started along this path. And I think companies such as PharmEasy will only help us to kind of, catalyze the whole thing and, move ahead. So truly inspiring, I think, in many ways, as Asha's mom also said, for all the entrepreneurs, and just in terms of what you're trying to do, the space that you're working in, it's truly fascinating. So thank you very much for, being there, being our guest this evening. Big thank you to Asha for, working hard and putting the session together, and to Anup for handling the Q&A. And of course, to our audience who has kind of been with us and who's, asked questions and helped to make the session interactive. So with that, I think we can probably, close the session. Big thank you to everyone. And
Thank you, everyone. This was really good. I'm very excited, as I said, with the advent of things happening on the government side as well. And we really hope that these things come into fruition and we are all able to be a part of it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Hardik. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Rekha. Thank you, Anup.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.